Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
So what we'll try to do is we'll try to understand what these different types of abilities are, what are the medical terminologies associated with it, and what are the different barriers these kind of limitations may face. So there can be a diverse set of limitations or abilities. So there can be auditory abilities, there can be cognitive learning limitations, there can be physical limitations, speech related or visual related limitations, and we will talk about all of these in order to understand through examples what are the different barriers they face, what are the different barriers auditory sense would face. Rather than we are saying deaf people, we are not talking about deaf people. When we are saying auditory, we are trying to understand the functional needs of it, of a deprived or limited auditory interaction. So there is a fine line, and there's a slight difference which we are trying to speak about, but trust me, this will encourage you to think and incorporate this framework in a much broader sense, and not just limit yourself into thinking that okay, I'm an assistive technology designer, I'm just creating assistive technology products. We are talking about inclusive design, we are talking about access for all. So all of these are a little bit different from each other. So let's try to dive in. So starting with auditory interactions. So what are the different kinds of examples of auditory disabilities? So this is the medical side of it, which we'll try to understand first. So of course, one is hard of hearing. So there can be individuals with moderate hearing impairments, milder, or in one or in both ears. This is called hard of hearing, जिसको which we call in Hindi ऊंचा सुनाई देता है. So but they can hear, but it's like a moderate impairment or a mild impairment. Then there is deafness, which is a complete loss or substantial or incorrectable impairment of hearing in both ears. So basically they cannot hear anything, right? Most of it at least. Then there can be another category, which is deaf blindness, which is substantial and uncorrectable hearing and visual impairments, right? Both disabilities together. Understand some examples of barriers for people with auditory disabilities. So audio content such as videos with voices and sounds without captions or transcripts is a barrier because they're not able to utilize their visual sense as well, right, in order to understand the content. Media players that do not display caption or do not provide volume controls, for instance. So for example, if there are media players which doesn't tell you where the volume is, and a person who is himself or herself hard of hearing, they may not be able to tell whether other people are able to hear what they are watching or listening or not. So I would rather like that I'm not like publicly broadcasting a movie which I'm watching using closed captioning, for example. Media players that do not provide options to adjust the text size or colors for captions, for example. So there can be, as we said, that there can be individuals who have deafness as well as low vision or color blindness or other limitations, right? So there can be players or media player interfaces which does not allow you to adjust the text size of the caption or colors for the caption. So many a times, if it is generally, black in color, the subtitles or the captions, in some of the movies you might have seen, like a Dark Knight, or movies which have a very dark theme. Many a times in such movies, black colored subtitle may not be visible against the background, properly visible, because there's lower contrast. So there should be an option to select. So now I think you might be seeing that Netflix or all of these other media players also, like VLC and other popular ones, they allow you to pick a color between white, yellow, black, and now it's like a palette also. So or to adjust the size, or choose where you would like to place the subtitle, on the top of the window or the bottom of the window. All of those are part of user control. So I, as a user, can select the positioning, the size of the font, because it's actually directed to help me. But if it is not giving me those flexibilities, probably I'm really not unable to use it properly. Other web-based services, including web applications that rely on interaction using voice only. So if there is no textual input available and it's just voice available, voice input is available, and if I am a person who is mute or deaf, then how would I understand the audio feedback and respond in a rightful fashion? So any feedback should always be presented in multimodality format, visual, text, along with audio feedback, along with any other possible ways it can be notified. So maybe vibrotactile in case of phone and notifications, you always see that there is also vibrotactile, that there is some notification that has come up. So the user can enable the accessibility features on their phone and then interact. That is also one way to look at it. Lack of sign language to supplement important information and text that is difficult to read. So sometimes what happens is that a lot of important information cannot be directly converted into text. So there can be, of course, like speech to text algorithms are very commonly available. But now I'm sure you're also aware that there are tools and methods which can, applications which are also trying to do text to sign conversion or audio to sign conversion for the benefit of people who are deaf and mute. Moving to the physical limitations or physical barriers. So there's a long list of examples of physical barriers, and these are all medical terminologies which can cause certain dexterity related issues or motor skills related issues. So amputation is definitely commonly known, where there are fingers or limbs missing or other parts of the human body are missing. Then there is arthritis or rheumatism, where there is a degeneration or damage to the joints, or there is inflammation, there's pain, the user is not able to stand and interact, the user is not able to bend their fingers or grab things the way it is intended to be performed with. Then there is chronic pain of the muscle or connective tissue. Rheumatism is typically referred to as arthritis. So in general, you might think of arteritis as knee pain, and one may think that, okay, why is knee pain associated with any digital interaction for that matter? But it's not just that. In many individuals, it can cause joint pain in fingers and knuckles as well, or in wrist parts, so which may be required to interact with your system. Reduced dexterity, this may be because of cognitive issues, neurological disabilities, or age related decline as well. Multiple sclerosis. This is also a medical condition which can cause damage to nerve cells in the brain or spinal cord, and can affect physical, cognitive, and visual abilities in a particular instance. Then there can be muscular dystrophy. So dystrophy is like a progressive weakness or degeneration of muscles. Repetitive stress injury, this is something I'm sure you might have commonly heard about, that if you spend too much time on a laptop or a computer and you're constantly pressing the button of your mouse, so this is a repetitive stress on a particular bone, joint, as well as a particular muscle, which can cause specific types of issues with nerves or with joints, etc. So it's also called repetitive motion disorder. It can involve injuries to muscular skeletal system from repetitive tasks. So, and also a lot of RSI is observed with laborers or people who work in factories, because they are doing one specific movement like for 8 hours a day, constantly doing the same thing again and again. So those that comes under the category of repetitive stress injury. Then there can be people who experience tremor or spasms, we call in Hindi, twitches, or continual rhythmic muscle twitches. So you might have seen people where their fingers kind of lock in places, or they experience incorrect placement of their limbs or fingers sometimes because of this. This is also commonly known aspect. Then there is quadriplegia, and then this is something which is like partial or total paralysis. This is something which is commonly known, I'm sure you might know it as paralysis. So where certain sections of the body get paralyzed and not the entire person. So you are able to control certain limbs, but you are not able to control all. In many cases of quadriplegia or tetraplegia, where there's a total paralysis of all the limbs. So I'm sure you all have heard of Stephen Hawking. So he had this issue, and he was not able to move almost all of his body. But he was using this specially created assistive technology for him, where he was using his cheek muscles. It was so closely monitored. It was cheek muscles, and then it was transferred into more of a brain computer interaction mode, which he used to kind of communicate with people or write books for that matter, because his brain was really working, but he was not able to move his limbs. So then even in that case, how we can enable interaction with the technology? Then there can be seizure disorders, so something which includes different types of epilepsies or migraines, which many a times can be reaction to a flickering of visual, or it can be a reaction to repetitive audio signals of certain frequencies which can trigger seizures also in your users. So we have to be very careful of using such feedback. You might have noticed that now even Netflix, they issue a warning about photosensitive content. What is the meaning of photosensitive content? That is, it involves visual flickering, it involves seizure triggering content, which and like custom and like user discretion is requested in order to access those content. So it's right next to like foul language and all of that. So it's like a warning that it is what it's there in this movie. So please make sure that you are aware before watching this movie. So I think that is also as can be thought of as part of an inclusive design process. Let us now try to understand various examples of barriers for people with physical disabilities that we discussed in the previous slide. So websites, browsers and other authoring tools that do not provide full keyboard support. So many a times the shortcuts, the F keys are not supported by a lot of data entering tools, or the numlock, the number keypad which is there in a lot of keyboards, full length keyboards are not supported by a lot of tools these days, because in most of the laptops it is missing, right? So but the code should enable that. Then there can be insufficient time limits to respond or to complete a task, so such as to fill out online forms. So if it is if the user is slower in their dexterity, they're able to do it, but they're able to do it slowly, but you put insufficient time limits and the website clocks out very soon again and again. I'm sure you all might have experienced this with the railway ticket booking website and all of that. So because it clocks out very soon, by the time you're filling, or maybe if you go and fetch your Aadhaar card just to enter something, or you're asking your fellow passenger for some age related information, it clocks out. So those things should be avoided. Then controls including links with images of text that do not have equivalent text alternatives. So basically links which there are images of text, but actually there is no real text, so which is similar to like a captcha, but actually like a banner etc, which has some slogan where there is written text but it's in a visual format. So then or there may be buttons etc which are not really accessible, which is not really text, but it is like a printed text on top of the button. It's part of the visual design. So then that is something which is not accessible to a lot of interfaces as well. Then there can be missing visual or non-visual orientation clues, such as page structure or other navigational aids. So what are orientation cues? So orientation cue may be that if you want the page to be rotated into a horizontal format, because there may be more columns than rows. There may be more columns which need to be swiped right in order to access in a form or in a table something, but can be easily viewed in a landscape format. Then probably there can be some indication of doing that, or there can be both visual and non-visual cues to do that, or there can be specific page structure and which is consistent throughout the website, so that the users or the visitors don't feel like flabbergasted with the changing designs or changing layouts every time they click a new page link. and other like navigational aids like route map or site map, which is called, right? So if you want to understand in which part of the whole navigational tree you are currently at, there are some websites where you can see like a site tab which keeps showing you the entire navigation, and it just like highlights where you are currently in the entire tree. So that is something of another navigational aid. There can be inconsistent or unpredictable or overly complicated navigation mechanisms or page functions. So we can have a discussion about various examples of this particular barrier, and the inconsistency part is quite common, and designers many a times fail to keep designs, color, page structure, orientation of the layout, and all of that consistent throughout the various tabs of the same website or the same application. Suddenly, the colors may be entirely different or so and so, which can just throw the user out of the cognitive map of your website. So it is very important not to fall into that trap. The unpredictability is also something very important to consider, that based on the consistency only we can predict that okay, the next thing which is about to come will also be of the same color. The submit or the save button will again be in the same place. If if it's a form and you are filling one step, right, so every time then there is a submit button or a save button, it has to be in the same place in every page. So all of those things are quite important. If some place it is every time, if the user is supposed to fish for information, it can become too much of a cognitive load as well. And also they may need to navigate the entire page again and again. Because of the low dexterity, it can be very problematic or limiting. So moving to speech. So first, looking at examples of speech disabilities. So there's something called AOS, or apraxia of speech, which includes inconsistent articulation and production of speech. There can be cluttering, which is like increased speaking rate or incorrect rhythm. So it is sometimes similar to stuttering, or in Hindi what we call haklana, for example. Then there can be dysarthria, which involves weakness or complete paralysis of muscles that are necessary to produce speech. It can be throat, it can be tongue, it can be lips, it can be lungs, which enable. So all of this system enables you to speak, but there can be paralysis of one or more of these muscles, which can cause weakness or bad speech, basically. Then there can be speech sound disorder. So there can be difficulty or inability to produce certain sounds or patterns. So sometimes, like for example, I had an uncle who couldn't say sir, the sound of sir. So for example, he would always pronounce samosa as famofa. So he would say sir, he would say fur instead of sir, which was very funny. But as a child, it was very funny for me. But then when you read about all of these aspects, you understand that it is a certain inability to produce a certain sound, or then there can be omission of certain kind of phonics, or there can be substitution of some sounds with others. So like as I mentioned, he would say fur instead of sir, and he would pronounce samosa as famofa. Which is interesting, but can be a barrier to communication. Then, of course, there is stuttering, which is commonly known limitation, repetition of individual sounds or entire words. Then there can be muteness or mutism, which involves the inability to speak due to various reasons, such as anxiety, brain injury, or inability to learn and hear and learn to speak. So, muteness is something which is inherent of people who are born with deafness. So, what happens is, how do you learn to speak? You basically copy how your parents or teachers or people around you are emulating sounds. You try to copy them. If you notice an infant, what he or she is trying to do is just copy the sounds. But if they are not able to hear, they are unable to copy as well. So that is something which in turn creates a speech limitation, which is called muteness. So basically they were unable to hear and thus unable to learn how to speak. So you might have heard about the term deaf and mute. Right? So now moving on to examples of barriers for such people with speech disabilities. So the reason we are trying to understand both the medical aspect related to disability as well as the interaction aspects related to each disability is, as we spoke earlier about it, that it's not just a medical condition, but it's a compound, complex system or interwoven exchange of energies and feedbacks and inputs and outputs in an interactive system. So, in order to enable it to function effectively, but if we do not understand the medical aspects, we will not be able to understand the interaction aspects as well. So it is important to study and understand both when we are talking about inclusive design and accessibility. But as we said, all of these examples, when we're talking about speech related disabilities, for example, they very well apply to all of these limitations, which are more of a permanent disability aspect of that spectrum that we spoke about, but they can be instances of temporary and situational limitations as well, which can enable better interaction for a wider range of people. So now we will try to understand examples of barriers for people with speech limitations. So, for example, web-based services, including web applications that rely on interaction using voice only. So, if the input is just voice, or if it is, how you want to enter the content is just voice, then it becomes a little bit problematic. Then there can be websites that offer phone numbers as the only way to communicate with the organization. So many times you might have seen that in the contact us, there's just a phone number, there is no email ID, there is no other chat box mechanism, or no other way to contact or report something which is wrong with the product. Rather, it's just a phone number. Then it becomes a limitation for people who are speech disabled or people who cannot speak at the moment, for example. Now we'll move to the visual limitation. So some examples of visual disabilities are color vision deficiency. So this is commonly known as color blindness. So it includes difficulty distinguishing between colors, and maybe all of us, it's a very common limitation, and it is now being recognized as one of the visual disabilities under the RPW Act, WD Act as well. And so I hope you remember that we discussed about that veg and non-veg logo, which has now become a red triangle and a green circle instead of green circle and red circle, because now it is accessible to colorblind people as well, because they cannot differentiate between color. They are differentiating it based on the shape. And so basically the red and green color blindness is something very common, and maybe in order to test yourself, you can also take the Ishihara color blindness test. It's commonly available on the internet. You can look it up. Low vision is also another kind of barrier, or it's also called partial sight in some regions. It can include a vision that is not sharp, low visual acuity. So even people like me who wears spectacle actually fall in the category of low vision, but it may be not that low that I am able to correct it using a spectacle. So these are called correcting glasses. So I am able to correct my vision using a set of pair of glasses, but there may be people who have low vision which are too low that they cannot be corrected with glasses. So then it's a bigger disability. But it is a disability for me also. If I take off the glasses, I will not be able to read this text. And I'm sure, which is very common, again, people who have myopia, if they are asked to take off their glasses, it's very difficult to recognize people's face from far off, or even read the blackboard or whiteboard in a classroom if you are sitting in the back of the benches. So all of these are limitations. There can be intolerance to light. It can be photophobia or light sensitivity. There can be inability to distinguish bright and dim areas of image. So basically contrast sensitivity. So the image may look flatter as it is, as opposed to how it's supposed to look. Inability to obtain information when looking straight ahead. So like field of vision loss can be central or peripheral or scattered. So in our eyes, I'm sure you might be aware that there is a central vision, then there is a peripheral vision, or then there is a further back, there is a scattered vision. So so it can be that the side or the peripheral vision is very low, or there is a lack of it. And so then the field of view becomes smaller. So it's basically as if you're looking through a hole, a circular hole. Those people feel like that. Then there is a definitive blindness, which is substantial or uncorrectable loss of vision in both eyes. There can also be a combination disability, which is a deaf blindness, which is substantial and correctable visual and hearing impairments. Let us now try to understand some barriers for people with visual disabilities. And I'm sure you might agree that since most of the information is now going into screen-based interfaces, visual disabilities and barriers related with vision account for a major percentage of barriers and hindrances in terms of interaction design. And most of the examples which we talked about in poor accessibility versus good accessibility session also, most of them were trying to cater to the visual barriers particularly. And I'm sure you'll also agree that since the information is being presented through a primarily visual medium, it largely causes a lot of hindrances with people who have visual disabilities, or who have temporary or situational visual barriers also. So then there can be images, controls, or other structural elements that do not have equivalent text, which can be accessed by a screen reader, which is again very common. Then there can be so all of these aspects I am saying common. Why I am saying common is we will discuss in a case study which will come in a few sessions, where we'll try to analyze a few government websites through evaluation tools, and then you will see that the simplest of things like color contrast or just images with no alt text were the major flags in those evaluations which came out. So that is why I am using the word common for all of these mismatched interactions, because they're very commonly happening across a large section of websites as well as applications which are coming up. Then there can be text, images, and page layouts that cannot be resized, that lose information when resized. So your application or your document is not responsive. The moment you transfer it from a website into a phone, it loses the font capability, it cannot be resized, it becomes too small to read. So then all of these aspects can cause a lot of challenges. They can be missing visual or non-visual orientation cues, page structure, other navigational aids. So I think we already had a discussion about navigational aids or orientation cues, which kind of guide you to turn the phone or turn the tablet in order to access the text properly or image properly. Video content that does not have any text or audio alternative or an audio description track. So there may be videos which have some music and then there is some video playing, which it's not really describing in an audio feedback mode what it is really about. So it is very difficult for people with visual impairments to understand what the video is all about, if it's just like a music playing and an image or a set of images or a video with just a music playing. Then there can be inconsistent or unpredictable or overly complicated navigation mechanisms. This is already we have discussed in one of the previous sections about physical disabilities and barriers for people with physical disabilities. Those can also be true for people with visual disabilities. So the unpredictability, the inconsistency can cause a lot of hindrances in interaction. There can be insufficient contrast. It is also again a very commonly happening mismatch in interaction between foreground and background colors. This is something which we also discussed with examples in the previous session. Then there can be websites or browsers or tools that do not support the use of custom color combinations. So if I am not able to say select the color of my choice of a background or a text, then many times people with low vision or color contrast deficiency are not able to see, or people with red green color blindness are not able to read the text because of certain color schemes used. So basically, if there is some red color on a green background, people with red and green blindness will not be able to read the text. So that is, they're not able to differentiate between the red and green color. So you have to be very careful. Either you provide the choice, or as part of the design you are careful and conscious about your design decisions related to the selection of colors, for example. So tools that do not provide full keyboard support is also an issue for people with visual disabilities, because basically navigating through the entire navigation of the web page, or they use tab or other aspects of the keyboard, because keyboard is essentially a very tactile input device. It has a lot of tactile cues which can help the user to type or enter the numbers, etc. But if it is just a screen based keyboard, which is commonly now happening, then it may not be, it's just visual in that case, so then it may not be accessible by people with visual disabilities. We shall now talk about cognitive and learning disabilities, and it is also commonly happening, but primarily being overlooked disability, because it's not an evident disability. So for example, people who have blindness or who have low vision, you can tell by the way they are interacting, or many a times by the way if they are blind, they may be having a white cane, etc. But or people who have hearing impairments, they may be wearing some ear assistive technology on their ear. But cognitive and learning disabilities are almost always invisible disabilities, and they get largely overlooked in the society. I'm sure you all might have seen the popular movie called Tare Zameen Pe, where that young kid who had dyslexia, which is a cognitive disability, was being kind of scolded by his own parents, saying that he's not paying attention to studies, instead of understanding that probably he has a disability. So I think and particularly with cognitive and learning disabilities, it is very important to be very, very sensitive when trying to assess for it or trying to think about it. So it is important first that we learn about the terminologies, and there is a long list of cognitive and learning disabilities. So we'll try to go through the list so that at least you are aware, right? Of course, these slides will also be available for your reference. There can be age-related forgetfulness. I don't think there is much to explain here, but I'm sure you all might have, seen or interacted with elders in your family who might be going through, such difficulties, which is age-related memory loss. Then there is ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And so basically it is, which involves difficulty of focusing on a single task or focusing for very long periods of time. Then there is autism spectrum disorder. So it includes Asperger, it includes autism, it includes PDD, which is pervasive development disorder. So it involves impairments of social communication or interaction ability, sometimes restricted habits or interests. There can be brain injury, damage. Either it is, so what is the meaning of traumatic or acquired? So traumatic is like because of some falling down or because of some accident, there was a brain injury, but there can be limited development of some part of the brain, which can be termed as acquired also. That can happen at any stage in life and can lead to long-term impairment or executive function, memory, learning, coordination, all of these aspects, sensory impairments. Then there can be dementia, which includes memory loss, trouble concentrating or following a conversation, finding a right word. There are more examples of such disabilities. Their learning disabilities can be related to dyslexia. So dyslexia is something which affects the development of literacy and language related skills. Then there can be dyscalculia, which can be difficulty of learning number-based information, which can be math or tables. Other intellectual disabilities or developmental disabilities, so which may involve impairments of intelligence, slow or difficulty in understanding complex concepts. Other learning disabilities, such as, it's in Europe termed as a common term under the section of intellectual disabilities. There can be mild cognitive impairment, MCI, which is considered a stage between age-related and more serious decline of dementia. Then there can be other mental health related disabilities which can interfere with your daily functioning. So maybe due to depression, anxiety, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. There can be multiple sclerosis, which causes damage of nerve cells going to the brain and the spinal cord and can affect your cognitive, physical, or visual disabilities in particular relapses. So particularly during a relapse, they may not be able to decipher anything or understand a lot of information, but maybe after the relapse, they are able to again understand. So now trying to move to examples of barriers for people with cognitive and learning disability. So we'll now try to understand the various barriers for people with cognitive and learning disabilities. There can be complex multi-stage processes such as forms needed to be interacted with, and particularly this becomes even more difficult for things which you have to do compulsorily. So for instance, like a passport or net banking, for example, for this, it contains either sensitive information or access to your finances, so that it may not be advisable also, or you may not want it to be shared with agents or even your kids sometimes. Then that becomes a lot of cognitive load for people who are aging, who have all of these other cognitive or learning disabilities. So complex or inconsistent navigation mechanisms, page layouts that are difficult to understand, complex sentences that are difficult to read, unusual words that are difficult to understand, metaphors and other non-literal text whose meaning is not predictable from the usual meanings of the words. Long passages of text without images, graphs, or other illustrations to highlight the context. Moving, blinking, or flickering content. Background audio that cannot be turned off. Passwords and access codes that rely only on memory. So that is something which we are commonly seeing, but there is most of the time now even internet banking is allowing you to log in using OTP from your mobile phone, and so basically that means you're not relying as much on memory based passwords. Timeouts on activities. So I think we spoke about this, that if you give very little time, people who are taking a longer duration to understand all of the information on the web page or on the form, and they are not able to respond in time, it clocks out and they have to redo the entire thing again. Web browsers and media players that do not provide mechanisms to suppress animations of videos. So I think we also had a visual example-based discussion in the previous session about it, that you should always place mechanisms to either stop animations or audio if they are interfering with the cognitive process of reading or going through a form or things like that. So I think I'm sure you might all of you might have experienced pop-ups which start playing like ads, etc. It can be very frustrating. It can be even more frustrating if it is people who the users have limited cognitive bandwidth or are facing learning disabilities. Then it can be even more challenging. Visual page designs that cannot be adapted using web browser controls or custom style sheets. So these are, of course, this is not these examples of barriers for people with different disabilities that we discussed in today's session. Of course, it is not an exhaustive list, and as we go on, discussing examples and discussing through various case studies, through various popular apps and all of those, and various processes and frameworks as well. And we will also talk about different evaluation tools which you can utilize to assess the current accessibility evaluation of a existing product. So, but still, I think all of these aspects are important to understand, that from a user's perspective, these are the barriers when it comes to interacting with an interface which requires or assumes that you have a physical ability or you have a cognitive ability, you can see, you can hear, you can speak. So, but then if you remove all of those ability biases, then what are the barriers? So the intention for this session was that we as designers are able to understand from a user's perspective that all of these barriers can be possible, and then the commonly known aspects of even medical physical disabilities, like somebody like blind, is just a far end of the spectrum. There are other aspects of blindness like light perception or low vision or age related low vision or color blindness, which also can cause barriers to access. It's not just blindness, or it is not just entirely deafness or muteness. There is all of these spectrum of other aspects which can be more commonly happening to a majority of people. And then there is also these temporary and situational barriers which can occur in people who are supposedly healthy, but they, in that situation, they are unable to utilize their abilities to the best of their capability. So I think the idea was to make you aware of all of these different kinds of barriers which can happen in different kinds of interaction modes, and now and also make you understand the meaning of the phrase mismatch of interactions. So basically this is how we would like to summarize the session, that today we spoke about different types of digital interactions. We also spoke about different kinds of experiences of various disabilities. We also tried to understand what is the meaning of various disabilities, and all of them, they're on a spectrum. It's not like black and white. And of course, what is the essence of mismatch of interactions? There's a very nice book. I think I've already mentioned it in one of the sessions earlier, that this book talks about mismatch of interactions and a lot of commonly existing interfaces around us, which earlier were not looking at their technologies and interactions from a mismatch perspective. But then when they did, they were able to fix a lot of accessibility issues by default. So I think this is a very nice book which is available on most e-commerce websites, and you can access it. Thank you. That's all for today's session. Looking forward to meet you in the next session.